Lord of the Rings. Charlie Vickers I've interviewed a lot. So
Nice.
Lord Sauron. Season 1, he's a hero. Season 2, he's a hidden villain. What was the process of arcing him for the first 2 seasons? His journey, and then
Yeah, I had to lay the groundwork for that. The first thing I said when I got hired on Rings of Power, and we were going to look at the first episode, and I said, "What's the deal with the stranger? What's the deal with Sauron?" And everybody went ice cold. They looked around like, and I said, "Look, guys, I got to tell you, I understand NDAs. I understand security. I understand that there's only a few people on this show that you are safe to tell all of this to. Not even all the actors know, execs don't know, but I promise you, I have to be one of those people that you can trust with this, because the stuff I'm going to write for you right now in episode 1 has to pay off later." And they were like, I was basically like, take a deep breath and just tell me everything, you know? So that was groundwork that was laid. If you listen to the first single we ever put out, it's called Sauron. If you take that theme and play it backwards, you get Halbrand's theme. If you play it backwards, you get Halbrand's theme. If you play Halbrand's theme backwards, you get Sauron's theme. So in a very simple, coded way, I'm already kind of telling you that. And that was in the first episode. So coming into season 3, it's great to be able to drop all that pretense. You know what I mean? And Charlie gave such a fantastic performance. He is so menacing. It's almost impossible for me to remember it's even the same actor who played Halbrand, who was so inviting and vulnerable. So it's been great to take that same thematic material and now just empower it and supercharge it.
Our last question. I was struck by the scene when Mordor exists. Like when the Mordor and Galadriel has the smoke ash go over in your score. What was the process of you when scoring that scene? Because her expression, Morford Clark's expression, but you're setting up the world, that whole sequence, which I thought was one of the best in the series.
You got to remember, at the end of episode 6, that's the biggest episode we had done to date. It was the first episode that was predominantly a big battle scene. I felt like Morpeth. She just sees the thing explode, and she's just like, okay. It's like Matt Damon at the end of The Departed, just like, okay. Because I was just like, I am so out of steam, and I still have 2 more episodes to write after this. Just, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to write this. That's when I knew I would be able to survive Rings of Power, right? Because I thought, if I can do this, man, I can do anything. And I felt that way again at the 7th episode of the 2nd season, the Eregion battle, where I was just like, oh my God, you guys. But it's inspiring because the show is paced so well, and there's so many exciting moments that I feel like it pulls the best ideas out of me.
And you had the great moment where Sauron and Galadriel face off,
Incredible.
which I thought musically in that whole sequence was one of my favorites. How was that for you?
The show has laid so many great foundational pieces, and really what I love the most about season 3 is that we are now reaping the benefits of that. It is so exciting to watch these characters face off now with 2 seasons of connection. It's really, really cool.
Devil's Mouth and Bear McCreary. One of the things I like about his composing is the location as a character, the protagonist is a character, the villain's a character. For Devil's Mouth, how did you approach making sure it wasn't just a shark movie? For everybody the world also had its own distinct sound and music.
Yeah, for The Devil's Mouth, one of the first things I talked about with Bear was that we wanted the location and the caves themselves to have their own theme, because you wanted to really feel that our characters had gone someplace special, and we needed to both portray the sort of the wonder and the beauty of Thailand and the cave system, but then it had to slowly sort of transition into something more foreboding and something more dangerous, and we needed to do both. And instead of focusing on the shark, that's really what became the focus of the music for Bear and for me, and I thought that was so smart of him to land on that instead of making more of a meal, pardon the pun, out of the shark.
We have a lot of music students in the audience, film composer students in the audience. What traits that Bear McCreary has as a collaborator with you would you recommend music students to kind of pursue in composers, when they collaborate with the director?
I mean, Bear, for me, one of the reasons why I keep coming back to Bear, and it's my 3rd film with Bear, is that he is a storyteller above all else. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a really supremely talented musician, but I never feel like I am talking to a musician when I'm talking to Bear. I feel like I'm talking to a storyteller. And what he does is he then takes those story points and he figures out how to support them musically. And that literally is his job. So I don't have to talk to him about music. I talk to him about story.
And my last directing question, was your cast upset when you decided you wanted to go with real sharks? No CGI, no animatronics. Were they bothered by it? Did you get some flack with SAG?
Listen, I had to replace a few of them because, things happen.
Sharks eat.
No, we didn't have any real sharks. No actors were hurt in the making of our film. But I tell you what, they did a lot of their own stunts. They learned how to do breath holds. Yeah. They learned how to scuba dive. We were kayaking in the mountains of Thailand, just going up to mouths of caves. I mean, they were down for the adventure, and they worked really, really hard, and they did some difficult stuff, but no real sharks were used.
Bear, McCreary, and Singularity, what was it about this album that drew you and made you want to collaborate?
In a nutshell, Bear's music. On the first Singularity record, which came out in 2024, and we started working on this, Bear sent me, pre-pandemic, sent me a whole bunch of songs, and they were all really interesting, very challenging, very engaging from a musical standpoint, from a playing standpoint, from a listening standpoint. He had some really great songs, and that was one thing. Bear was definitely known as a composer and a video game, composer, as well as movie scores and things like that. But not a lot of people probably knew what a talented metal composer he was as well. And so I was like, Bear, you've got some kick-ass metal songs here that are really cool. And he's like, yeah, excellent. I have no idea. You're my barometer on this. I'm just writing songs. And so they were so interesting that is what really, brought me into wanting to play all the drums on the Singularity.
We have a lot of music students in the audience. Your working process with Bear, what do you recommend for our students to follow? The way you guys work together, the way you collaborate, something that would be a lesson for student musicians to follow?
Well, I would imagine, I would say definitely have enough of yourself ready to go. If your collaborator says, hey, show me what you got, then, be able to, have column A, B, C, D taken care of. But also, be large enough, I guess, to go to realize that, hey, I tried all the things. Here's all my thoughts. And if the collaborator says, you know what, those are great, but let's stick with what I got, just be ready for that. You can zig and zag in either direction, whether it be fully you or if it's going to be fully the composer or that collaborative effort between. You want to be able to be easygoing enough that you can manage whichever way the project needs to go to serve the songs the best.
Singularity.
Yes.
What was it about this project that most interested you, and it was also kind of a different genre for you, let's say?
It's interesting because whenever I work with Bear, it's always world building. The way he approaches producing is creating a world. It's like it's soundscape, it's thematic development, it's lush orchestra, it's all these kinds of things, and that works really well for someone with a voice like mine because I'm not going to bring the hard rock because that's just not where I come from. So I get to add the narrative quality of lyrics. I get to add, a certain vocal presence that I feel grounds it in a way that works for me and holds hands with the development that he brings musically.
Now, we have a lot of students in the audience, musicians who want to be musicians one day. Question, what is it about working and collaborating with Bear would you recommend as a good trait to have or a process, something you would say, students, you should emulate this because this is a good process or thing to have?
I would say when you enter the place where you're going to start recording or composing, have an idea where you want to go, but be open to letting the music lead you. Think, okay, I have the map. I pretty much know what I want, but, ask the music where it wants to go, because sometimes you're not going to end up in the place that you meant to be. Yeah, so I'd say open-mindedness. Yeah.
And one last question. A few years ago, Outlander.
Yeah.
You sung here at Comic-Con.
Yeah.
What was that experience like in Hall H in front of 1 million people?
It was so fun. fun. It was really, really, really fun. And then after that, Sam Hewen gave me some whiskey, so then I was drunk. So it was like great. It was just like, it was such a high. It was so beautiful, really, because I love the Outlander fandom so much. They're so kind and enthusiastic and loving. So that was like, that might have been my favorite Comic-Con ever. And I've been doing this for like 20 years. That might have been the best one.
We're going to talk a little obsession. So you only had a limited time to establish Nikki's look before the spell. What was the process of trying to define her look and also that awesome denim jacket?
Well, to help define her look, I really wanted this feeling of effortlessness. Like she wasn't trying to appeal to anyone. It was fully like to express herself and for comfort. And so I kind of did that with like blue tones and then like heavy layering, the drapery of the denim jacket, of course, with the like riding boots. But I just really wanted her to feel relatable to a mass group of people because I felt the more people could relate to her, the more they would love her and hold on to her as she transitioned throughout the spell, per se. And the denim jacket, actually, it's a really funny story. My acting teacher, about a month before Obsession, like I got the job, he handed me a trash bag of clothes, and he was like, hey, I don't use these anymore. Like, you should just take them. Maybe you'll use them. And inside that was the 1990s vintage Gap denim jacket that we ended up using in the film.
That's amazing. All right, so the spell happens. What was the process of then kind of deconstructing her character through costume as the spell, took more hold?
So originally Curry pitched to me to do like 1950s housewife, and I kind of like pushed against it, kind of being like, I think we can touch on that, but I think let's make this more drastic in the way of like kind of physically stripping things away from her. So like there were less layers, less jewelry, less individuality and creativity in her looks. They were more into the appeal of Bear and what she would think Bear wanted to see. So every time I was kind of creating a look, it was kind of like from an acting standpoint, like what's the new objective to get what I want? And when she wouldn't get something she wanted from Bear, like how would she physically alter herself to think that she could get something from him?
I was struck by the guys' night out party scene where she crashes the red dress.
Yes.
That was a pivotal moment, really, when the things kind of really unravel. What was your thought on costuming for that scene? And it was also, I thought, her best scene, like dramatically.
Yes. It's one of my favorite scenes of hers as well, yeah. The red top, I just really wanted to feel wild, feel drastic. And then originally I had pitched to do like low-rise baggy jeans, like very baggy jeans. And I was with a group of my guy friends, and one of them was like, wow, I really love when girls wear those little shorts. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that's literally the male gaze. Like that's what I should be. That's it. That's the thing that will really portray what I'm trying to get across with her altering herself physically to appeal to Bear. And so I switched it to those like small shorts, and then I did the like knee-high boots as like kind of a callback to Sarah's first costume, as if she's like slowly shifting herself to be and appear more like Sarah to get Bear's attention.
Yeah, I was struck by that. So that goes to the end where she does take on more Sarah traits, thinking that's what he wants. What was the process of kind of at the end with her last costume, which does get a little bloody too?
So that part where she wears Sarah's costume or the dress was written into the script. And so it was more kind of like making sure the dress was perfect, not only for Sarah, but for Nikki as well. But the blood was crazy. That was my first time working on like that amount of blood and vomit and like everything involved. But it went well. I'm very grateful to our head of makeup and special effects, Ali Shehorn. She really held my hand during it and like helped me really figure it out. And I learned a lot through the experience.
Well, as someone in my real life that had the exact same experience Nikki had, you nailed it, because I went through that in my last relationship.
Oh, wow.
What was, so looking back, so we talked a lot about the cool scenes. Is there any one scene maybe you're most proud of, more of a subtle scene? We haven't talked about something that, the audience might not notice because it wasn't a big dramatic scene that you really were proud of from the costume-wise.
I love the scene where they're on the couch and they're watching TV and she looks at him and he turns her head back to the camera. I love that costume. We did that during reshoots, and I just thought the two-tone red was just stunning on her, and with the headband, I just thought it was perfect, and I really feel like it pulled actually the whole movie together. It's such a short amount of time it's on screen, but I feel like it really pulled the transition between her before and her after. I really feel like it was that perfect middle piece that I was missing.
Euphoria finale.
Yes.
The gunfight.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning. how did you want to start with you setting it up? Ali's coming in. We know he's going to die. Like basically, you're telling the audience he's going to die. What was the process of setting up the dread before we actually get to the fight?
Yeah, there's so many sort of layers to this, and it's this kind of slow burn at first, right? Because he comes in, and at first you're like, wait, who is this? You know, so the first step is like we don't even show his face, right, as he's coming in, and so that's the first step. It's like, wait, is that Ali? Who is that? Who is that? And then all of a sudden you see him, and the stripper's kind of like talking with him, but he's like grabs her, right? And it's like, oh, he is serious. Like something is gonna bad. Like he's here for keeps, right? So that's like trying to ratchet it up, right? Ratchet that emotion up. And then again, you build up the tension, with, the other actor comes in, G, this is Alamo's, kind of right-hand man. And that scene is all about ratcheting up the tension. And it's just like, what does he know? And then Ali keeps escalating, right? He's like under the table, right? And so you just keep adding emotion, adding tension and building. Because and Alamo is behind the glass, right, with Maddie. And it's like, oh, well, when is he going to find out, right? But Alamo doesn't find out until boom, right? G gets shot. And then Alamo jumps up and is like, what is going to happen, right? So then you keep ratcheting up, and then you see Alamo. Alamo's like, what's he going to do? Alamo looks up at the bullhead, right? And then it's like, wait a second. And Maddie slides down. She's like, because she knows what's going to happen, right? And then he's like, Ali is like, give me the, where's Alamo? Come out. And all of a sudden, crash, right? So it's just, in each of those moments, it's about making sure that each one feels like an escalation of emotion ratcheting up. And that's what the trick is, right?
And I like that scene because, Maddie is, you've already said that Maddie's in danger. Yeah. He wants to have children with her.
I know.
It's creepy. But so for you, before Alamo comes on, which we'll talk about next, how was it for you making sure now you're showing Maddie and making the audience feel for Maddie the most?
Absolutely, yeah. And so those scenes with them inside the room, they're very intimate, and there's a kind of dread, actually, when they go into the room. It's the two of them, and Bishop is on the outside, and that's another interesting layer there, because Bishop and Maddie have some chemistry, right? So, but the door gets closed on Bishop, and Alamo, Maddie is basically trapped in there with Alamo. And Maddie's trying to keep it professional, and she's kind of just like, here's the money, here's your thing, I'm just gonna, And then suddenly Alamo, for the first time ever, gets kind of personal and gets kind of emotional, and you get to see a different side of him. But the problem is, it's still him, right? And even though he says all of these things, he wants, to have babies with her and do all these things, and it's like, oh, is he different? Has he changed? But then actions are louder than words, right? When the head crashes through, what does Alamo do? Grabs Maddie as a shield, right? Actions are louder, so he doesn't really care.
That was my best moment. Like creatively, that was amazing. You did that. But now you also established that he's willing to cheat. But we know Ali is not. So when you're setting up the gunfight, how did you want to play in the audience thinking one of them will honor the deal, wait for the bottle to drop, the other one's going to break it?
Yeah, and actually I made a very specific editing choice in that moment. So there's a moment when Alamo specifically says, and no cheating now, right? And so there's this one angle that they used, and it's from the side. So the camera is just right on the side. It's the side of Alamo and a shot from the side of Ali. And I only used those two shots for the cheating line. So in order, because that's such an unusual and special shot from the side that doesn't look like any other angle. So I saved it, and I only used it when Alamo is like, no cheating now. And I'm like, because you're right. Because that's what we're trying to build up, is like, well, of course he's going to cheat, right?
And then, of course, how was it then having the bottle roll, the old 12 o'clock clock, and ending with the awesome twist of Bishop actually saving Ali? What was the process like setting up with the clock, really, and then paying it off with that?
It was really fun, and I went and watched a bunch of old, duels, and kind of the ticking clocks. And I know there's the one movie where there's a stopwatch that has the little song, and when the song runs out, the duel happens, and so there's all these different versions of that. And I really loved playing with that moment, where the bottle's rolling. And there was one choice that I made actually in the music to really emphasize the bottle rolling. So the bottle rolls, and you hear it roll, and the music's building, But then as soon as the bottle goes into the air, I cut the music off completely. So it's just as the bottle is falling through the air, it's just silence. And you see Alamo and you see Ali. It's just silence, silence, smash, right? To emphasize that moment, right?
And then finally, the last shot
Yeah.
of the series.
Oh, yeah.
With Zendaya. How was that when you saw it emotionally? Because you've been on the journey with this too, with the film.
Yeah.
What was the experience like getting the payoff of that moment?
Unbelievable. I mean, every time, all the editors, we would sit and we would watch, the whole episode together, and we all cried every time. It was really devastating. It felt like we were losing a friend. This is somebody we have spent, years and years of our life with, and Rue just feels real to us, and we all loved her, and we all wished for her to have a happy ending. And it's devastating. It was heartbreaking, and we were all really, really emotional. 14 months before the show came out, I read the script and I cried for 2 days. Yeah.
Initially, what made you want to come on board Spider-Noir?
What made me want to come and work on Spider-Noir? I would say the script, for sure, and Nicolas Cage. It was great. I got the script, I loved it, I read it, I could totally see it. I understood what they wanted, what our showrunner, Oren, who wrote it, what he wanted. I thought, okay, I understand this. And then I knew it was Nicolas Cage, and I'm a huge fan of Nicolas Cage, who isn't. And I was like, this is a no-brainer.
Now, it kind of opens more film noirish. The style's more broken down there. What was the process of opening, trying to establish that kind of gritty noir world before you really introduce, the superheroes?
Yeah, we worked on the opening a lot. Thanks for asking that. It was a big process to get to what you see in the pilot right now for the opening. So, because it combined so many different things, right? So it had black and white. It was Nicolas Cage voiceover, like a Sunset Boulevard style voiceover. So black and white noir leaning. Then it had Spider-Man swinging through the streets of New York and a ton of animation, right? And then it had live action of Nicolas Cage. So it was really a mashup of genres. So it proved that superheroes and noir can be genres that can work together, right? Which is basically what we tried to show for the whole 8 episodes. So this was really kind of like the litmus test that we did. So we really worked on it a lot to make sure that we could nail it. And that, it had action, it had emotion, it had a backstory. So I think it did a lot for the show in a very concise way, and felt really effective. And I think it set up his emotional journey, because at the heart of it, if you're not engaged with the characters and if you don't care about them, then it doesn't matter, right? It could be all a bunch of other stuff, but if you don't care, then, it doesn't matter.
Now, from an editing pacing standpoint, it must have been challenging how to balance the superhero and the film noir.
Yeah.
Like when to pull, you don't want to do it too quickly, too drastic. What was the challenge of kind of like weaving in the superhero stuff so it doesn't kind of, overtake the noir?
For sure. And that's something that actually Oren, he talked about a lot too, because yes, of course, it's Spider-Man. That's what the project is, right? But also at the heart, it's Ben Reilly and it's Nicolas Cage, right? So you want to keep that, always the beating heart of that and what his emotional journey is. And so we did have Spider-Man parts, and we did talk about in terms of editing, maybe setting a little bit more noir pacing for times when we're with Nicolas Cage, when we're with Ben Reilly, right? But then when it's action and it's Spider-Man, an audience is more used to a traditional, a little bit more faster paced editing. So we were sort of cognizant of keeping both of those happening at the same time.
We have a lot of editing students that watch. So I'm curious, is there one scene in particular that you're most proud of? It could be more of a subtle scene that took a while to get, but you're really proud of, the editing students could study.
I mean, I would definitely say the opening, because that you can see the balance of everything. It's something that for sure editing students could study, just how when the voiceover started, when the lines come in, what images are happening at that time, when the score comes in, what the sound does, the rain and the fighting, and I would definitely say break that down. But I would also say I love the Rockefeller fight. At the end. Yeah. It's so fun, right? Because it's very, he's just walking to Rockefeller. So it's kind of, and there's score there, and it's kind of tense. And then you get to the top, and you're not quite sure exactly what's going to happen, right? It's a little bit slower. You're watching me standing on the edge, the wind, all the visual effects look great. But then it becomes something that's a nod to noir, right? It's funny. It's like you have the punch, and he like looks to camera, which is a very like kind of dated thing to do, but it's so fun. It makes it so wonderful. And then it becomes an action piece, and then it becomes the reveal of Sandman, right? So it's like it becomes this modern day thing, and then he gets thrown off the building, and you see him make the decision to come back and be Spider-Man again. So it's just, I feel like it has a great arc, an emotional arc with him. Nick was wonderful in it. So just, I feel like it's such an interesting sequence.
The boys. You had a lot going on this season. What was the biggest challenge going into this season, kind of, because you're ending it, but biggest challenge, for the season for you evolving?
Yeah, you're right. It, not only last season, but going out on its own terms, which is really cool to work on because we know that creatively going in, this is the end. So I would say the biggest challenge was, as you work on season after season, you want to keep pushing creatively and changing and evolving. And when you get to something that you know is your fifth and final season, at what point do you keep pushing and evolving, and what point do you start referencing? At what point does the crowd or the fans want to hear that thing that you've done a few times? And so I think it was we were constantly navigating that all the way up through the finale.
Now, Homelander had a unique arc. Most people don't end as God. What was the probably arcing him out and giving him his final kind of character journey?
I mean, first of all, I have to say credit to the writers, right? Because they're the ones that thought of all this crazy, awesome stuff. Like, gosh, it's so well written. Anyways, so yes, it's hard to take too much credit for Homelander's arc. From a music standpoint, there was a lot of referencing. His sound did change a lot of seasons. There was the season where he had I don't know how gross we can get, but the gray pubes. And point being, he started to consider his own mortality, and that had its own sound. But a lot of this one was back to that classic violin motif that a lot of people are familiar with.
Now you have some send-offs, beloved characters dying. How did you want to approach that, kind of giving them? Because we have big action scenes, we have awesome scenes, but at the same time we have real emotional trauma. Well, how did you want to balance that, especially when you're doing some of your beloved characters sending off?
That's a fantastic question. It's incredibly difficult because you want to empathize with the scene that you're writing for, right? And make sure that you're engrossed in it. But I'm not scoring the scene because of Matt Bowen's emotion. And that was a challenge during this whole fifth season, but the finale in particular. It was like, okay, how much am I bringing my own baggage, not baggage, but like emotion to this, and is that too much? It was a challenge to say goodbye to those characters, and some of the send-offs were so beautifully shot and beautifully acted that the most appropriate thing to do was to actually play it dry. And so there was quite a few send-offs that were just so striking that we said, we agreed with Kripke, who's the showrunner, this no score on this.
Okay, Paradise.
Yes.
We'll go back to Paradise. What was it about Paradise that made you want to come on board initially?
Initially, so John Requa and Glenn Ficarra, they're two of the executive producers and some of the directors. I worked with them like 10 years ago prior to another project. So when they start doing something, I get interested, and they gave me an email. They're all, what are you doing? I'm all, I don't know. What are we doing? Let's do it. So, but literally from reading the first script, it's one of those ones that I was looking through the pages and I wasn't seeing a whole lot of visual effects, and I was all, okay, maybe this is kind of a slow burn, kind of a mystery. And then you get to the last couple of pages of the script, you're all, okay, I get it now. I see why the visual effects will be needed. So.
All right, so we have kind of two different worlds, the bunker world. Yes. What was the process, what were the challenges of creating that bunker world look?
So when we're on the interior of the bunker, basically, we built the whole city in CG. So when we pulled big wide shots, we built the cities, the schools, the town center, this big, there's this mountain, this fake mountain that wreaths the entire scene. We built all that. But when we're on location and practical locations, our job is just to kind of fill in just little things in the background that kind of give hints to those worlds, because we shot in a lot of locations around Los Angeles, but with the production design and those little CG extensions here and there, just really kind of tied that world into our CG world.
Now, conversely, you have another world, the apocalyptic world. What was the challenge of kind of creating that different world?
Yeah, I mean, the first challenge was, again, when the scripts came out, we're like, oh, so we just spent all this time building Paradise, now we're going outside of this. So, on one hand, it's like, so what is that going to be? And I think they wanted something, the showrunners and basically everybody wanted something a little unique. There's a lot of post-apocalyptic things out there right now. We wanted ours to kind of stand out. And I think one of the ways we did that was kind of the scale of some of these things. Like when you come to the bunker door, we wanted it to be this big towering thing. And we shot that at a location in Pyramid Lake. And it's literally, we had a green screen and two small parts of the opening doors. And we basically, the whole hillside and the big opening doors, we ended up doing it in visual effects in post. And it was one of those things that, once we finally got it in the shots, we're all right, this is looking good. It's got the scale that we want.
Is there any scene you're most particularly proud of? It could be a small, subtle scene, but one that really stood out for you. Maybe it was challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a scene in season 2 where our character Sinatra, she's pretty much resigned to the fact that she's going down with the ship. So she's this slow walk through the downtown of Paradise City, and all these panels from the ceiling come cascading down and break around her, and it's just kind of it's this great moment because the cinematography, the visual effects, the location, everything kind of came together, and it was just one of those moments that when it all came together, and I saw with the score and the color correction, it was like, okay, that all came together. And like all the different disciplines got to shine on that one,
What was it about One Piece that initially drew you to the project?
Well, I heard, this is going back a ways, but I had a friend who was, he was one of the producers, writers of the show, Matt Owens, and I worked with him on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I had a long history with him, and we always got along really well. Whenever I had one of his episodes that he wrote, I thought, it's going to be great. And I heard, this is around the time, right before the pandemic began, I heard he was doing a show called One Piece. I wasn't super familiar with the content. I was a comic book kid growing up. Batman, Superman, and things of that nature. And somehow One Piece got by me. And I heard about the show, I looked into it, and I went, that's a big swing. That's really, I'm not sure about this one. But it kept gnawing at me. I was interested in it. So I started looking into it, I started reading about it, and I went, wow, this is really cool. And he and I started talking, and he says, yeah, I want to get you on the show, and I'd love to do that. And then the pandemic happened, and it was quiet for a little bit. I thought it went away, and then a few years later, I get a call, hey, we'd like to bring you onto the show. Oh, great. And when you start reading the scripts and what they were intending to do, you're like, I mean, they're really going for it. And they're going for it in a big way. And this can go in either direction. And obviously season 1 was received really, really well. Huge viewership. And season 2 only got bigger.
All right, so we have a lot of editing students that watch. What one scene are you most proud of? Maybe the one that was most difficult to pull off. Could be a smaller, intimate scene that you were like, wow, we pulled this off.
Well, there's a few scenes. I always talk about Reverse Mountain. That one was just fun in general because of the collaboration, figuring out the shots, discussing with the previs editors, discussing with the visual effects department, music, sound, and keeping the stakes high. But the one that I don't talk about too often, but I think was a lot of fun and an interesting experience was in episode 5, Wax On, Wax Off. We have a sequence at the end where some of our straw hats are encased in wax on the candelabra, which is this big giant cake structure that's spewing out wax, and it's slowly encasing them. And Luffy and Usopp are trying to rush to their aid. And then we have this big fight sequence that happens with the Straw Hats trying to defeat Baroque Works. And the way it was scripted and shot was this fight, then this fight, then this fight. And it was all good, and everything was working. But it became a little like, okay, for some reason the stakes aren't really here right now. I'm feeling a little, the pace is slowing down. So somebody said, is there a way to intercut these fight sequences? Is there a way to make take each aspect of this fight and keep building on top of each other. Keep raising the stakes, keep raising the pace, keep raising the tension. And again, I had no musical background at all. I couldn't tell you anything about music, but the way we were looking at it was, rhythm, like the rhythm of music, the rhythm of the song. And we would figure out transitions to get us in and out of these fights, so that if we left the fight with maybe Zorro and Mr. Five, we wanted to feel like, well, maybe Zorro was in trouble, and it's a cliffhanger. And then when we come back, well, okay, now I got to play catch up, and it keeps the audience engaged, and ultimately we keep building, and I'm going to use the only musical term I know, the crescendo, and once they defeat it, okay, we can release the tension now, and it was just a lot of fun to put that sequence together, and again, it was when somebody says, well, the secret, often an early cut, the secret really isn't working, I'm not quite sure why. As an editor, that's when I get excited, because you start to figure out interesting, creative ways to solve these problems, and it's always done through editing.
So you just came off moderating a panel.
Yes, my first panel ever. It's crazy. Oh my God.
What did you enjoy most, being able to talk craft with the costume designers, editors, so many different types of artists?
Just kind of like seeing them all say their answers, and then just kind of seeing how they all cohesively work together within their own fields. It just kind of made me realize that it really is all about community and working together at the end of the day, on whether it's like film or TV. So that was really cool to.
All right, so panels are challenging too, though, because you have to balance, make sure everybody what was the challenge of making sure everybody had their time to shine and kind of integrating the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think with this panel, we actually had like an amazing group of panelists, because we all talked before. They were all really nice, really great, and it was just really easy bouncing off of each other. So it actually wasn't too challenging. Yeah.
Now, for me, one of your panels, I had personal experience with Obsession, because I had the exact same thing happen to me, and I was Nikki in my real life. How fun was it actually to talk Obsession and costume and Nikki?
Oh my gosh! Honestly, hearing because we got to talk to the person that works behind costuming, with Blair, who is amazing. But just hearing how much costuming does really shift the story of Obsession and how meaningful it is in driving that story was so cool to hear in person.
We're going to talk some Spider-Noir. You have a great 1940s old school film noir and superhero. How do you approach the sound when you're trying to balance those two worlds?
A lot of experimentation. So, because it's not something that's ever really been done before, so we weren't sure exactly if it was going to work. And we came in with the idea of let's make it sound really old, like a 1940s Bogart era movie. We made everything mono. We picked sounds not just of the time period, but of the filmic era where we recorded things with older technology. We did things with equalization and mixing it more mono as opposed to being in a giant theater. And then it was just a matter of how do we find how to introduce a modern sensibility to it. And what we ended up doing was starting in a film noir mono, establish this, and then as it becomes more of a superhero show and less of a detective show, we start to expand the palette in the sound and use the space more. So if you see it in a movie theater, if you ever have the opportunity, you'll hear it be much more mono and then spread its way out.
And in a home surround system, you could hear it too in such a way where the first spot to really see that is the spider sense coming to life for the first time when he's chasing Addison. And that was where we really wanted to showcase this idea of that he's coming back to life and his sense can hear everything. We've been in the 40s noir-esque film world, but now this is a comic book blockbuster that we're trying to present as well. So we wanted to have that fulfill through all the speakers and have it really have that low end that you would never have in a movie from that era.
That must be an interesting balancing act, though, because you're starting, like you said, mono, old school, but you also can't blow up the sound too quickly, because the audience will be pulled out. How was the process of progressing it, where you had to kind of pace it a little, almost like saying editing, pace it so the audience is not totally like, whoa.
Yeah, it's about picking your spots. So we first sort of marked out where the spots that we wanted to be full fidelity were going to be. So that spider sense was one, and then a little bit through the end of that scene where the oil refinery explodes, and then go back down and then come back again when Cat Hardy sings for the first time in the alcove, and then come back again during the fight with Sandman when the Sandman gets revealed. So it was really picking those spots and then just finding the way to gradually expand out into it, or using a specific sound. So in the case of the Spidey sense, like that warble that we introduced the Spidey sense with allowed us to go from the center channel all the way around the room very organically, because that sound demanded that we do that.
And that was very much a choice made, that, we wanted to make it sound like the way spiders hear, and the way they hear, we found out, was through their legs, through the web. And that was a great way to tie into the multiverse of kind of where the noir character came from, and having this idea that, well, it should be this low frequency vibration, not high frequencies, because it's all about the vibration of the web. So it was a lot of fun to be able to take that, and Ryan Collins, our effects mixer, moving it around the room the way he did, opening everything up, was so organic and smooth that everyone just, we want to do it in a way that's subliminal, so that you don't know what's happening, and then as we come back down, you're kind of like with the alcove and Cat Hardy singing, he's mesmerized by it, but then he hears one of the goons coming in, and we have to slowly bring that back into the mono-esque feel.
Yeah, so much of sound and what we do is so that you feel it rather than hear it. In a way, and that was one of those elements. Although I kind of describe it as we try to be like a magic trick, where we don't want you to see how the trick is being done, but we want you to be affected by it all, and that's ultimately the goal of what we do as sound creatives.
All right, so is there one particular scene that you're most proud of? It could have been a subtle scene, doesn't have to be a big one, that, what, we pulled this off. This wasn't easy, but we're really happy dramatically how it paid off.
For me, the Spider Sense moments in general were all great. But one of my favorites was at the end in 108, when we are in that big fight at the very end where we have Sandman and Megawatt, and we have to hear the sand and the electricity and the intensity and the spider thwips and the car going by and slow motion, and doing that and dialing it in very specifically to have that beat to go with the composing score was such a unique experience to feel, and then also take us back down to a quiet moment where Silvermane and Cat have their final moment together and get the audience to feel that eeriness of what's about to come for them. So dynamically, that was so much fun to create and build with the entire team.
And what was your favorite?
I was going to say the mirror scene, the mirror maze sequence with Cat and Silvermane at the end, because that was a real opportunity to do a very film noir visual thing and utilize sound in the space in a way that the films of film noirs back in the 40s didn't get to do. So you have Silvermane and Cat's voice sort of ping-ponging around, and the glass shards when she shoots the mirrors, filling up the room and everything. And it was just that, that's kind of the epitome of the balance between a love letter to film noir and making a modern movie.
Even underneath that, we have that subtle subliminal sound design where we have to lead you to the next mirror, and we have to have these high frequencies and low elements. So like he said, it's just that ode to noir, but keeping it in that modern worldscape.
What was about Scary Movie 6 that made you want to come on board?
Really, I've worked with Mike and Marlon and Rick before, so that was a given. And was just like such a great project to be part of. So, who's going to say no to that?
Now, I really like Anna Faris's costumes in this because it's later.
Right.
She's in a different state.
Right.
She's a little crazy.
A little cuckoo.
How fun was it kind of like inventing her look in a different character state?
Right, so because she is the character that we love and know from scary movies before, 20 years ago, we come to meet her 20 years later, and in the script, of course, she's written as this crazy woman that's kind of gone off the grid, and she's preparing to kill Ghostface. So it was actually really interesting because we really needed to carve an arc, a character arc for her to start off with this crazy, and then slowly she gets pulled together till she's like the John Wick's badass at the end, where she just kicks everybody's butt. So it was really fun, and Anna was just so amazing and just all in. So it took us a moment to understand the real how crazy she really is. With the combat boots and the hiking boots, and then just the Laurie Trude kind of look at the beginning. But yeah, it was really a blast, and we wanted to also like keep a little bit of who Anna was before, and I did like there was one or two T-shirts which are like an Easter egg of a shirt that she wore in Scary Movie 1 that we kind of redesigned it, and on the back of her jacket, I don't know if people noticed, there's a butterfly on her main jacket that she wears, and the butterfly is really to represent the kind of like her like evolving, kind of like a life of a butterfly. So I put a few details in like that to just try and give some hints of what's to be.
I did like your take on Sinners.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to say we're spoofing Sinners a bit,
Right.
but the costumes definitely reflected, but it's also interesting in itself. Like I felt they were unique. What was the process of kind of like you want to spoof it, but you really did create a great look for those?
Right. So the whole spoofing theory in this movie is 30%. So we have to change everything about 30% in order to be legally okay to spoof it, but it's still we want people to immediately know what it is. So of course Ruth Carter's costumes are amazing, and we wanted to evoke that look. But I also wanted it to be, the own character's look and our own look. So just finding the balance between, the real spoofed movie and, the world of Scary Movie.
Okay, so is there any specific costume you're most proud of? Maybe it could have been a lesser character, minor character, something like, take a note of that one.
I think the two that stand out to me is Tiana Taylor's dress at the beginning of the movie, because that was designed for her body and only for her body. And also Shorty's tracksuit, his Gucci tracksuit when he starts out, his first look, so when we see him after 20 years. I really wanted him to look like he's got a lot of money now. And just the whole idea of him having weed on his outfits all the time.
Let's go back to me, My Adventures with Superman. What was it initially that drew you to the project?
I mean, come on, Superman. You know what I mean? That's like such an honor to be a part of that. At first, I thought it was an honor to be a part of that legacy. But then once I got to get to know like the show creators and the story that we were telling and how unique it was, I mean, it's been a dream project because it has so much heart. It's really about Clark Kent, Lois, and Jimmy and that friendship, and now Kara and new characters. So it's really a show about like a sense of family, and that's like really what's drew me to it.
Now, there's been a lot of interactions with Superman, and also the awesome theme, to begin with. How did you want to pay homage to the originals, or how do you balance doing that, but you have to make it your own?
Yeah, there's really no competing against the John Williams theme, so there's no point in trying to do it. So we totally took a right turn, and we do a lot of like metal guitars and a lot of like big orchestration. It's a lot of anime influence, so it's like everything in the kitchen sink at the music. So I just try to stay away, and I tip my hat in subtle ways, but no, I didn't try to mimic that at all.
What I like about this is Clark gains his powers. We're following. How did his music evolve as he evolved as Superman?
Yeah, it evolves a lot. I mean, in particular, we're in our third season now, and Clark is dealing with a lot of personal identity crisis. Like he's having an identity crisis. So it's totally changes. So this idea of this like really robust, heroic Superman theme really doesn't even work for our show because it's such an intimate story. So it's been fun to adapt the themes as the story unfolds.
Now, in the movies, one of the drawbacks of movies is we can't really spend that much time with Clark and Lois as characters. What I love about this is the opposite. We get to spend. How is that musically for you to be able to actually develop the music for their relationship?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's amazing. That's the best part of the show, in my opinion. Just their dynamic, and it's really on display in season 1, and the audience really loved it. So to be able to score those moments was a joy.
Now, we have a lot of composing students in the audience. I like to ask, is there any particular scene you're most proud of that you composed? Something that, it could have been even a smaller, intimate scene. Something like, wow, I really like, we really did something special here.
Yeah. I would say the climax of season 2, when they defeat Brainiac, when Clark and Kara defeat Brainiac. In this show, I get the privilege to write 12-minute long pieces. So it's real, I really can arc things and really tell a lot of story musically. So that last 12 minutes of the season finale of season 2, I'm very proud of.
What was it about Shrinking that made you want to come on board?
The people involved initially. I've been working with Bill Lawrence for 30 years. And I had kind of gone off and I was in another direction. And then I got the call that they were putting this new show together. And it was with Jason Segel. Harrison Ford hadn't been cast yet. But as soon as I heard the storyline, I was like, let's go, I'm in. You know? So.
What I like how the look and the design changed as he evolved. His apartment changed as he got more counseling. What was the process of kind of like taking him in his darkest place and then kind of evolving him throughout, the show?
Great question. So we approached the series, at least in the first season, as a 5-hour movie because we're a half-hour show, 10 episodes. And the first season, Bill said initially, the first season was going to be about grief. Second season is about forgiveness. And the third season about moving on. And so we knew that, we didn't want to do like an overt version of a guy in grief with bottles everywhere and garbage and all that. So we came up with these strategies to dial all the colors down, keep the drapes closed, all the plants are dying. It's clear that he wasn't taking care of himself or Alice, his family. And so over that 5-hour arc of the first season, things started to open up. And it was kind of a slow burn, but also our director, James Ponsell, came up with this brilliant idea where he would leave the right side of the frame empty to show where Tia, his wife, would have been standing if she was still with him. And so it was things like that, that were kind of developed organically in the pre-production process, but really resonated with audiences once it was out there.
Now, conversely, what was the approach to Harrison Ford's office? How did you want to represent his character?
Well, I had actually started on the show, I think about 2 months before Harrison was cast. So I initially didn't know who I was designing for. And when it was announced, we were just all over the moon. It was like, seriously, Harrison Ford's going to do TV? It was like, he was on 1923, but he actually shot with us first.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, even though that one aired first. So, but the first thing he asked the producers when he landed was, I want to meet the production designer. And so I'm like, oh no. I was so intimidated. And so I had my one-on-one meeting with him. And it was literally like, I'd like to describe it as if I was sitting in front of Mount Rushmore. He was just, but it turned out that he was super articulate, really sensitive to, what his character needed. And after a few minutes, I just kind of fell into this conversation with another creative collaborator. It just felt like a natural part of the process. He had some very insightful ideas because he had just spent a week with Phil Stutz, who's the actual therapist that his character's modeled on. Jonah Hill did an amazing documentary called Stutz about the man, and he also has Parkinson's. So Harrison came up with these ideas based on Phil's practice. When Phil Stutz would be in an hour of therapy with somebody, his muscles would get very tight. And so between sessions, he would have to work out in his office. So Harrison's like, I need chairs with really strong arms, like metal arms. I need a credenza that I can do push-ups off of. Things like that. I need a bike in my office because maybe I go for a ride between sessions. So it was all those sort of things. And then also from the Phil Stutz research that he did, Phil had created what he called his tools, which were basically mechanisms to get people to get better. And so we based a lot of the artwork in the room and some of the set dressing items based on that research.
A little Dr. Seuss.
Oh yeah,
Sneetches.
It was a good time.
What initially made you want to come on board?
Oh man, well, I don't think any composer would turn down a job scoring for a Dr. Seuss project. So really, nothing stopped me from wanting to come on board. But I was lucky in that I knew the songwriter. To be honest, we had done a few Disney shows together, and so I had an initial recommendation, which was always very helpful.
Now, there was a challenge because this is expanded to a longer version than we were accustomed to in Doctors. What was the challenge in making it a longer, run time and a bigger story?
Well, for me as a composer, it's actually easier to work in longer formats. I do a lot of Disney series shows where the episodes are 11 minutes long. They're bite-sized shows for kids, right?
Yeah.
And I came from a background doing indie dramas and long-form feature films where you have scenes that go on for 5 minutes, but with an 11-minute show, your scenes last 30 seconds, right? So as a composer, you're jumping ideas every 10 seconds. You have to come up with a new melody or a new genre. It can be kind of exhausting. So with a longer format, you get to groove in a 3-minute scene all day and just sort of work on one moment, and it allows you to get into the flow more. So I prefer it.
And how would you approach dealing with the theme of the moon and the stars? What was the process, kind of like giving them each their own kind of musical sound, but and merging them together, evolving them together?
Yeah, having different sound palettes for each group was initially the concept, but as we scored it, we sort of realized that most of the story material was really just about these two characters who are spending all of their time together. It's really about their friendship. And it really wasn't emphasizing their differences as much as emphasizing their similarities. So there really ended up not being that many opportunities for the score to be that distinctive from one side to the other. And so we really just ended up focusing on developing a sound palette that captured the world, which was a mix of sort of Polynesian influences for the island setting, the quirk necessary for a Dr. Seuss project, like kazoos and chipmunk vocals and interesting percussion instruments and things like that, and then all the action adventure elements that we sort of covered with the orchestra. So we ended up sometimes concepts come into the conversation that sound great, but don't always end up working in execution, and that was the case here.
Back at moderating. So what was it like moderating here at Comic-Con? You met just San Diego Comic-Con for your first time.
Well, it was my first time. It was a blast. The energy's crazy. I'm speaking with these creatives that work on these amazing shows. Have you seen Spider-Noir? Yeah. Spider-Noir is crazy. Scary movie. I had a blast at the theater with. All of these projects that these creatives work on are so unique and so inspirational to me as a filmmaker. So yeah, it was a blast. I loved it. Comic-Con's awesome.
What do you enjoy most, being able to get the costume designer, editor, sound? What is the most fun part about being able to explore all these different areas within one panel discussion?
I think just craft. As a director, I'm often interacting with all these different department heads, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm, I have a panel of all these different department heads and experts. So we just get to get into the craft of it. Like I was asking some of the composers about what do you do before you see any images of the film? Do you write music just based off of a script and then figure out how to put it into the, and then I talk to them about my experience with my composer and how I like to make music before we even show up to set, and then we could play it for the people on set. So everyone has their own little methods of doing things that works for them and for their craft, and that's the most exciting part for me.
And as you mentioned, as a director, how's it for you then, since you're getting to interview all these great people in town, how does it help you then the next time when you're working with a composer and editor, as a learning process, applying it to your own craft?
Well, some people talk about interesting things that they do, or they'll give interesting advice, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to try that on my next set. It wasn't here, but at another panel I was at, someone was talking about how their director loves to do silent takes, and at the end of every take, they'll at the end of every scene, they'll run the scene again with nobody speaking, and they just go through all the actions and the emotion. And I was like, why am I not doing that on my movies? That's brilliant. You get all these reaction shots out of everyone. It's you get, I'm sure, beautiful performances out of the actors when they're limited to what they can use. And so you learn things, and you talk to these people that you respect and admire, and they want to see you succeed too. And everyone's just very friendly, and it's great.
I want to go back to the beginning for the writing stage. I love the old concept of the old radio people sitting around the radio listening to storytelling.
Yes.
And this is kind of reminds me of those great old days, a classic.
Yes.
What was the process though? You have to create a whole new world that we're not used to. You don't have the tools, the visual tools. What was your process in writing, creating the characters, but at the same time trying to create this whole world, a different world of telling stories?
I think, we sat down and we said, what's happened in the last 7 years to us? Interpersonally. What horrible little small things have happened to us?
Right.
And we came up with a ton. And I think the characters came out of those little weird interactions we had.
Yes, just little social
mishaps.
problems, just little social situations, and then combine that with what we imagine as a Game of Thrones-esque, gigantic fantasy world. To me, that's a winning comedic juxtaposition. The mundane and the fantastical, I find, is always fodder for something.
Question, so we have a lot of writing students that watch. So was there any episode that you guys kind of really wrestled with, took a while to find the voice, but you're really proud of when you pulled off? Like a really challenging episode that had some problems, but you really, wow, we nailed it.
The bards, we rewrote those bards 4,000 times.
Yeah. We had trouble with the two the two women who narrate the show. We had to like modulate the nuances of that plot line a bunch of different times.
The pacing took a while to figure out.
The pacing took a while because that is an arc that builds over the season, and so we did not pace that correctly, and we had to re-record it. But you can re-record it because it doesn't cost that much money to re-record it. So it's just it's a very forgiving medium.
Well, thank you, Ms. Scott, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let's go back in time. So, especially for Fire and Ash, what was the process for you when you first designed the costumes? Because you want everything authentic, but it's also multicultural, and it's also a fantasy world that hasn't existed yet. So what was your process of making real costumes for the actors that inhabit?
Well, it really starts with a lot of research. I mean, first we read the script, of course. So the script is kind of the roadmap, right? And then I really deep dive into the characters and what their journeys are in each of the films successively. You know, how much time has gone by, what their emotional state might be, because I do believe that costumes really are the best visual narrative for explaining the character. So, and then we do a tremendous amount of research about anything, everything. I mean, you can't, like for the Wind Traders, I was looking at photography of if you're really high up looking at the Earth, which is where I kind of got the swirly patterns, or conversely, if you're looking at the clouds. So anything from looking at I'm getting off topic a little bit, but looking at a microscopic leaf, perhaps, for shapes. But we world build, and then it's really about understanding each clan and kind of making up what your rules might be, right? And that really is a lot dependent on their environment.
And also your characters go through, especially in Fire and Ash, a journey of, light to dark, dark to light, anything. So did you have to evolve the costumes of the movie showing their descent or rise?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You pay attention to that very closely because, it's kind of tricky on the Avatar films because it is a bit of a fantasy, but it's so based in our humanity, and that's the idea. Like, you're supposed to look past, for me, I look past the fact that they're 9-foot-tall blue people because they're so human.
Now, the actors must have really embraced your costumes because this is a fantasy world. Did it really, you think, help the actors ground themselves in the character? Because they need something real and tangible to feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And we use a lot of different ways in there. Sometimes we don't necessarily. Once in a while, they get to try on a completed piece. Usually they have a stage piece that sort of indicates motion. But for instance, when the kids first started, what do they know about wearing a loincloth? So, we did a couple of days of really intensive putting costumes on them and then letting them run around and jump around and just sort of so that way when they get back on stage in their performance capture suits, they have some, they feel it. They know it's there. So.
One thing I love about Cameron is he uses special effects, obviously, but his first instinct is to try to do as much in the practical world. So what's the collaboration, knowing that you have your director who wants the practical stuff, costumes, but working with the visual effects team to enhance it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very much for costumes, a very much a two-step process. And one of the main reasons we make all the costumes, and there's a million reasons, but the main reason is that then the visual team, the virtual world team, has something to ascribe to. Right. So they got to look at that and say, I got to make that as good as it is. Right, so, and then they do all their trickery, and then luckily for me, I get to stay on the process and work with them as well. So I make the costumes once, and I make the costumes again. So it's quite the journey.
All right, so we'll go back in time a little. Beef Season 2. What was it about Beef Season 2 that made you want to come on board?
You know, I really love to laugh in dark moments. And of course, I had seen season 1, and it was amazingly funny and amazingly dark. And so I was really excited to work on season 2, and even more excited to know that it was going to be a completely different storyline and a completely different beef, a whole new cast, so we could really create something new while still having that really dark, twisty tone.
Yeah, that was my thing, which I loved about it. It wasn't the same thing.
Completely different.
So you had to create a whole new. What was like the biggest challenge for you, kind of creating the new rules of your editing universe?
There is one thing, we call it the beef rubric, that kind of carried over from season 1. A lot of times we talk a lot about the perspective character of a scene, and that is so important in such a huge ensemble. We need to know who we need to relate to in every single scene because there's so much to get across. So often we will put that perspective character in clean coverage where the other characters are in dirty coverage. So it's kind of this visual cue to the audience on this is their moment. We should be paying attention to what they're feeling, thinking, that sort of thing.
But if you're having these different characters, then from the editing standpoint, you got to pace them differently. Each character will have their own different vibe, or editing vibe.
Yes, I mean, for me, besides that, I don't find editing to have a lot of rules. You really trust your instincts, you go with your gut, you cut to what you need for that moment in the story, how to get those things across. You know, we have all of these characters we need to understand, you need clarity. They're making terrible choices, but we need to empathize with all of them and understand why, because that's what makes them interesting. You know, people can make bad choices and you just don't like them, but it's much more interesting if you understand their hurts and the things that are making them make these choices, and it makes you feel something for them. You might not agree with what they do, but at least you have an idea of why they're doing it.
So one of the questions, we have a lot of editing students that watch. Is there any scene that you're most proud of? Something like, this was a little difficult to pull off, or something that was like you'd say, take a notice of it because I really like how we did this, pull this off?
Yeah, you know, there's a scene in episode 203, and it's a lunch scene in the China Bamboo House, and you have Austin having lunch with Ashley and Eunice. And what's unique about that scene for Beef is the perspective actually changes halfway through the scene. So the scene starts as Austin's scene, and it changes to Ashley's scene. So the editing structure of that was very deliberate and very detailed. So we start on a close-up of Austin, he's clean, and you pull back and you see him sitting between these two women. And that kind of is this visual representation of what's going to happen for the rest of the season. He's caught between his feelings for both. What you'll see in the beginning half of that scene, while it's Austin's scene, we do actually keep him in dirty coverage, and that's so that we see a woman in front of him every single time. So a little bit different than that rubric I was just talking about. What you'll also notice if you watch it carefully is when the women talk to each other in the first half, you never cut from one to the other. You're always relating them through his looks and through shots of him. So we're having them communicate basically through Austin and everything's happening in his reactions, his looks back and forth, the silences. Then when Ashley starts to catch on that Eunice is maybe a threat or something weird is happening, we do that beef rubric where we now go to clean coverage on her, and now it's like, wait, now this is Ashley's scene. And you get to see things from now her perspective of watching. So instead of being in Austin's perspective of feeling caught, we're now in Ashley's perspective of what's happening here.
And that could have been dangerous, like pacing-wise, because it could have pulled the audience out too. You have to do it differently, but did you have to worry about how to balance that to make sure we didn't actually throw off the pacing of the entire scene?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very delicate balance when so much of what you need to get across is silent and in looks, and how you make sure that you're catching those things while understanding the dialogue that's happening, you know, sometimes off camera, and keeping, you know, three people sitting at a table interesting and engaging. Yes, yeah, a delicate balance there for sure.
Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to talk some Spider-Noir. So our first generic question is, what made you guys want to jump on board this amazing project?
Well, I love the 1930s. I did another show, Perry Mason, and I thought, ooh, we get to dive into another world, but it's not just based in reality. It's like the fantasy of Spider-Man, and how do we make that work together?
I just love working with that team. So Helena said, do you want to do this? I was like, oh, work with you? Yes. And then also I had done a couple other Spider-Man projects, so I was kind of already nerdy about working on it to see the difference, or like, oh my gosh, it's going to bring back a lot of memories. And strangely, it did not. It was such a very different, completely different Spider, not even Spider-Man, the Spider than I was used to.
It's interesting. It's almost like, because half the movie superhero, half is noir. It's a good team because you're both like the most perspective. All right, but the beginning of it is really noir is the heart of it at the beginning. Especially the opening scene, the opening pilot. You have to establish a noir world, Nicolas Cage's office. What was the process of trying to establish the noir angle of it?
We really leaned into old movies. We did a lot of research. Again, we wanted to create a real world and then put that noir spin on it. So we did a lot of research. How did people live in the 1930s? How was it being a Depression era? What were the challenges? So we had to make it feel real, but also give that noir spin. And so one of the influences was the Maltese Falcon. Like, we really, Humphrey Bogart, not only did, Spider kind of talk like him, but we really tried to make his environment look like that office.
And how about for you? What was it, creating the noir world, what was the most challenging part for you for that?
Shopping, thinking about color and black and white at the same time. So we need these drapes. They have to be a specific height. However, they have to have a certain amount of contrast between the background and the pattern. And you're like, oh my God, I actually found all of these and they're the right height. Oh no, but they look terrible in black and white. And a sad trombone sound just follows you everywhere.
I guess the next challenge is, but you have to, and slowly as the series evolves, we know the superhero stuff becomes more prominent.
Yeah.
So what was the balance? Now you have to create a sets and designs that are part noir, part superhero. How did that work?
So we had a lot of collaboration between all the teams. We had our stunts coordinator, we had visual effects, we had special effects, construction. Like, how do we make these sets and these environments that supports the action? Because even though a lot of visual effects go in, you're still having actors performing things in real life. So it's a real choreography of departments.
And for you, what was the biggest, or the most fun set to work on when you got into superhero stuff?
Oh, fun set. I don't know if, okay. My favorite was the we had to do a bunch of different backlots and dress them completely out. And we had to do the universal backlot, and that was the most fun for me. I thought that looked, like, once it was all done and dressed, I thought that looked the coolest and the most like the city, and the graphics were amazing. And I just like, it sounds boring, it's a street scene,
No,
but
I love it.
that was the most fun for me. And also because it became a collaboration between everyone on the team in the end, and when everyone comes together on one thing, that also gets me really excited.
All right, so fencing. What is your background and interest in fencing?
So my background actually is kind of an offshoot, and what I mean by that is, that's kind of the purpose of our movie, is to educate people on what fencing is and the fact that they may have already seen fencing, they just didn't know it was fencing. And what I mean by that is, I'm a martial artist by trade, so inspired by the man himself, Mr. Bruce Lee, at the age of 4 years old. Bruce Lee created his own martial arts called Jeet Kune Do. What a lot of people don't know is that the footwork from Jeet Kune Do is from fencing. So in a weird way, I do claim that I am taught in the art of fencing through the footwork of Bruce Lee's martial arts JKD.
Now, the thing I like about fencing is it's very cerebral, as well as physical. What is the process of trying to understanding the actually strategy as well as understanding the physicality?
To be honest, I was a four-sport athlete in high school and in junior high. I played football in college. I'm a martial artist. I think everything is mental, you know what I mean? But fencing, I think the environment, right? And the fact that you're getting poked by this, literally by like a stick. Like, if there's nothing more annoying in the world than trying to poke someone else who just keeps jabbing you. It's just mental. You know what? I feel like it's more on the side of like tennis and golf on the mental side, where it's such an individualistic sport, but yet there's such an adrenaline rush, because it's combat. Not to say that golf and tennis aren't to that extreme, but this is a combat sport that has derivatives from basically life or death situations, in old Europe.
But dramatically, what I find interesting with sword play, especially in films, is the characters actually usually interact with each other. if you're having a fight scene, we don't talk.
Right.
Is that something? Does that say the reason why Hollywood has kind of gravitated towards that? Because not only do you have the physicality of it, you can actually have character drama.
Oh, I think 100%. That's correct. You know, obviously in any sport, you're going to have some dialogue with the opponent at some point, right? But I think this, like I said, it's such an individual sport, and the roots of it, literally from like, I bet it's like an aristocratic way of killing another person. You know, the roots are. So now it's like you get to tell the other person, you get to communicate, you get to have that level of drama, you know, before actually dying. I mean, why wouldn't the industry want to highlight something like that?
Now, fencing and swordplay go back in Hollywood to vaudeville days, like the original films. Why do you think there is such a marriage between Hollywood and fencing? Really, of all, I would argue all the sports, that one is the biggest marriage.
I just think because of what the storytelling has evolved from kingdoms, from knights in shining armor, you know, from everything that's even relevant with Game of Thrones, you know, like that comes out so many years, you know, later from like what these traditional, like Princess Bride, stuff like that. I just think it's one of those foundational elements of literally combat, and Hollywood has a true history with that. And as we were seeing, like it's 2026, and we're announcing a new film about fencing.
Yeah,
it's still going, you know what I mean? And I think the fandom is ready for it. I think they love it. They've seen it before, like in Wednesday, for example. Even in K-pop Demon Hunters, there's an element of sword fighting. Star Wars, obviously. So I think, you know, it's always been relevant. It just has never been highlighted that this is actually it.
Yeah. We're here talking about fencing.
Yes.
What is it about fencing as an actor that you enjoy most?
Ooh, I don't know that I've actually, at least on camera, I've never fenced as an actor. I have on stage a bunch, but most of the fencing I've done has been like as an athlete. I grew up fencing and fenced in high school and college, and it gave me like some of the most thrilling experiences of those years. And I think also this you probably won't hear as much because it's such an individual sport. But when you do get into high school and college settings and you're competing as a team, this individual sport but in a team setting, it gets very intense and very thrilling because everyone is like keyed in on very, very small movements that the difference between an inch means the world between winning and losing, right? So there's a real intensity to it. It's a lot of fun.
Why do you think Hollywood film and swordplay, going back to Errol Flynn, or going back 100 years, the early days, even before sound and the vaudeville with the music, why do you think there's been such a love affair and connection using fencing and swordplay as integrated into dramatic storytelling?
I mean, I think it's timeless, right? Because it's part of human history, and so there is something inherently dramatic about it. And we've been handling swords a lot longer than we've been handling guns or anything like that, right? So it's something deeply connected to who we are, and it's life or death, and it's two people, two swords, and what's going to happen. And that's what the sport picks up on, too, is that two people walk into a very confined space. And I can move forward, I can move backward. Neither of us can move side to side. It's like, you know, it's like fencing on a plank. And so it's just inherently dramatic. And so if you're watching every scene to find out what's going to happen next, then fencing is tailor-made for drama.
Are you hoping with the Olympics coming up in LA that the marriage between Hollywood and fencing would be a good opportunity to really introduce fencing even more to a lot of people that might not know it as well?
I mean, I think we're already married, right? So it's just letting people know that it's been here for so long, and I think it's kind of one of those things where lightsabers, like it has taken so many different forms that people don't even realize that it has this kind of omnipresence. It's just the sport itself that may feel a bit of a mystery, but it is it's addicting if you allow yourself to be part of it.